So let me tell you about a guy who seemed to have it all. He had a brilliant engineering mind, a shelf stacked with film awards, and this unshakable belief in a world without God. His name is Ghazi Rakayet, and this is the incredible story of how he set out to debunk a single book and ended up having it completely rewrite his entire reality. And that quote right there, that really says it all. You have to understand, he didn't start this journey looking for faith. He started out as its biggest critic, armed with pure logic and a mission to prove it wrong. So what on earth happened? Let's get into it. All right, Section 1, a crisis of faith. So how does a man go from being a fierce critic to being completely captivated? Well, the story doesn't begin with a search for God, but with a personal crisis that absolutely destroyed his faith. So you've got this guy, right? He's trained in logic at one of the best engineering schools in Bangladesh. Then he becomes a master storyteller, winning an incredible 28 national film awards. I mean, he was at the absolute top of his game. But then a family tragedy struck. The death of his young nephew triggered this intense fear inside him, and a deep, deep anger at the very idea of a creator. And this was the question that just haunted him. It's so raw, right? It was this cry out against what he felt was the ultimate unfairness of life. If there's a God, why is this kind of pain and suffering part of the deal? He just couldn't reconcile it, so he rejected it all. He even threw out his prayer mat. Now, he didn't just kind of drift away from his faith. Oh no. He actively built this intellectual fortress against it. He dove into the works of scientific giants like Einstein and Hawking. And he came to the conclusion that, you know what, the universe can be explained perfectly fine without a creator. For him, atheism was the only logical path for a modern, rational person. His intellectual fortress seemed totally secure. But instead of just defending his position, Rakayet decided to go on the offensive. And that decision, well, it would change absolutely everything. This is the real turning point, you guys. He wasn't looking for answers. He wasn't looking for comfort. He picked up the Quran for the first time with one single goal: to dismantle it. He was going to use his scientific mind to find every contradiction, every error, every little thing that couldn't hold up to logic. Section 3, finding science in Scripture. Yeah, so he didn't find the errors he was looking for. Instead, almost immediately, he started finding things that began to chip away at that scientific certainty he was so sure of. He's reading along and then he stumbles upon this verse, written way back in the 7th century, and it stopped him dead in his tracks. A text that describes the heavens and earth as once being this single, joined thing that was then separated. I mean, to him, that sounded eerily similar to our 20th century concept of the Big Bang. This was the first major crack in his skepticism. So he kept reading, right? He turned his focus from how the universe began to how it all works. You know, the mechanics of the cosmos. A topic where, let's be honest, most ancient texts are famously wrong. He knew that for most of history, people believed the sun was stationary, that everything moved around us. Then he read this. The verse didn't just say the moon had an orbit. It explicitly says the sun is also swimming in its own orbit. Now that was a direct contradiction to all the accepted science of the time it was written. And this created a huge problem for his skeptical mind. It wasn't until the modern era, with things like the Hubble telescope, that we confirmed that the sun does in fact have a massive orbit around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So how could a 1,400-year-old book contain a fact that science took over 1,000 years to discover? All right, Section 4, the mathematical design. After cosmology, his investigation moved into a world he understood really, really well as an engineer, the world of mathematics. He started looking at the very structure of the text. He started digging into research about mathematical properties of the Quran. He looked into claims about the golden ratio, that number 1.618 that seems to pop up everywhere, from galaxies to our own DNA, and he explored how it might be mathematically embedded in the text's structure. But it was a different calculation that truly stunned him. A deep dive into the Quran's 114 chapters revealed this mind-bending symmetry that he just couldn't ignore. Okay, now this from his engineer's point of view was staggering. Look at this table. Researchers took each of the Quran's 114 chapters and they did a really simple calculation. They added the chapter number to its number of verses. So for chapter 1, which has 7 verses, the sum is 8. They did this for all 114 chapters. And the result? A perfect 50-50 split. Exactly 57 of those sums were even numbers and 57 were odd. But here's the kicker. When they added up all 57 of those even sums, the total was 6,236, which is the exact total number of verses in the entire Quran. To Rakayat, this level of hidden mathematical structure was just impossible to explain away as a coincidence. And the connections just kept getting weirder. He focused on chapter 57, titled Al-Hadid, which means the iron. First, he noted the number 57 itself is significant. The average isotopic mass of iron is about 57. Then, he looked into Abjad numerals, this ancient system where each Arabic letter has a number value. He found that the value of the full title, Al-Hadid, adds up to 57. And the value of just the word Hadid on its own? It's 26. That's the atomic number of iron. For Rakayat, the wall of coincidence had just completely crumbled. This felt like intelligent design. So all of this evidence, from cosmology to mathematics, it just piled up and pushed him past the limits of his skepticism. And it led him not just to a new belief, but to a completely new philosophy for how to live. He develops this powerful metaphor to explain his shift. He said that all his intellect, his engineering skill, his artistic success, all of that could get him to 99. He could achieve almost anything, but he felt that he could never ever on his own reach 100. That final piece, that single one that makes you whole, he concluded was something beyond human effort. It was a surrender to God. And with that surrender, the anger and the existential dread that had plagued him for years just lifted. The man who had been at war with God found a sense of profound peace and purpose that he says all his worldly success could never, ever provide. His hunt for flaws ended in a discovery of wholeness. So Rakayat's journey really forces us to ask this question, doesn't it? For a rational person, is faith a discovery? He didn't abandon his rational mind. He followed it. For him, the evidence he uncovered, both scientific and mathematical, led him to a conclusion his emotions had once rejected. It suggests that for some people, faith isn't a blind leap, but the final step on a long road of intellectual discovery.